You probably realise that the smart learning texts we use in the student book are deliberately chosen to be colourful, engaging, and supporting active learning. The texts they're theme-based, but we kind of nibble at the edges, the boundaries of those themes, because sometimes we can take, for example, Gothic. Now, Gothic, is likely to be full of those sort of Frankenstein texts, that sort of stuff, which you'd expect, and largely that sort of stuff is there. But we're always saying, how can we actually use a theme like that, then travel out from it and find text which perhaps you wouldn't normally find in that theme in other areas. So you'll find that there are more modern texts, and we've also kind of we've interpreted that theme in a looser way than you might expect. And there's quite a lot of non-fiction in there as well. So all of our student books, if you take the Gothic one here, they all contain a whole variety of texts, some fiction, right up to things like very modern texts, such as in Twilight. But we also have graphic type of texts, non-fiction, and some of the non-fiction's even original texts, especially written for these books. So you're getting stuff you can't get elsewhere. But it's all our text selections, whether they're for Gothic or survival or war and conflict or the coming titles, they are all there really to engage the students, to make them feel as though they're holding something which is familiar to them, that fits with their culture. It feels more like a magazine, and also it does support the active learning which we're trying to build into the lesson plans that accompany them. The lesson plans themselves. What we're really trying to do is help teachers to move away from loads of teacher talk to a lot more independent student learning, much more discovery methods of learning. So the teacher's role, we're trying to make sure the teacher has the chance to step back from simply instructing and spend a lot more of their time simply guiding students as they work and assessing them, so that students can be assessed as they go along, and the teachers can work out a lot of information about what they know and the progress they're making. And that means that the teachers can kind of intelligently adjust the rest of the lesson or on planning for future lessons. And we give a lot of help with that, because the teacher's book doesn't just contain lesson plans, but we're also in there, we've got a lot of general guidance about active learning techniques, particular formats for learning, and quite a lot of guidance about, general guidance about how you can integrate ICT with the lessons and so on. One area that we're very keen to promote is the whole business of group discussion. So you'll find that a great many of our lessons are based upon promoting group discussion techniques. But we're trying, we understand that group discussion can be quite disconcerting for many teachers, because they don't quite know where it'll go, and they think, well, maybe the students aren't going to learn anything if you leave them to just chat in groups. And why would they learn anything, of course? But what we do is give a lot of guidance about how you can make that group talk format work well. So we give a lot of guidance around things like structures of group talk, scheduling group talk, the sort of tasks which are likely to keep them more on in the tracks. We give a lot of guidance around things like the composition of group talk and roles and so on. So our main concern is that if we can build more group talk in, it's more a case of the students are doing the work rather than the teacher, and we're trying to transfer the emphasis from from teacher activity to student activity. We want students to be working hard on the teachers. And also we think that there's a virtue in it anyway, because the trouble is when you're teaching, of course you don't really know what's going on in the mind of the students, you're not very clear, but when they are talking to each other, then of course you can kind of listen in and watch out, and you pick up on things like misconceptions, and you pick up on things that they're clear about, and it means that you can plan much more securely for the future. Another aspect of it is that more able students in particular challenge each other. But sometimes when able students are just sitting and listening to the teacher and responding in whole class sessions, they may not be very challenged, and very often you find that you get the impression that the first answer they give is kind of the best they ever get to. Whereas in a group situation, if you set it up right, then they can challenge each other, and they can't just rest on their laurels and think, well, the first answer I give is the best I'm going to give. Their students will challenge them, their peers will challenge them, and they can take their answers and their thinking further. We do build into the materials, into the teacher materials in particular, quite a lot of advice about differentiation, and we provide progress criteria for students. They are written in a language which is fairly understandable to students, but is certainly understandable to teachers, and will allow teachers to help students to understand how to make progress. What is it they need to do to get better in particular skills? And all the lessons are focused on very, very particular skills. It helps teachers to help on the differentiation. It helps teachers to understand how they need to sort of moderate their lessons in order to make the lesson content accessible for some students, but challenging enough for others. And we do recognise that that we want, through the creative approaches that we're suggesting, we want those approaches to be ones which help able students, particularly able students, to be inspired and to move on and to challenge themselves and to challenge each other. So I think you'll find that the highly challenging texts, the engaging texts, the variety of texts, backed up with some really good advice on how to deliver those texts to students, I think you'll find that you're able to challenge even the most able students in ways that they can live with. You won't leave them behind, you won't confuse them completely, but I think you'll engage them and inspire them, and it'll be a very good starting point for them to take their own learning to higher levels. Of course, we're waiting for a Key Stage 3 new curriculum, and by the time you see this, we may well have the final draft of the new national curriculum. My own view is that probably this isn't going to make much difference because, of course, as you are very well aware, only about half the schools, probably fewer than that in the country, are actually bound by the national curriculum at all now. I don't think that matters too much because the national curriculum certainly does give some sort of framework within which we can all work, and we all want to know, have some clear sense of what it is that English is and what is this subject we're trying to deliver to students, what is this subject we're trying to engage students with. In recent years, I think Ofsted, who have often been criticised for so many things, I think their recent report on English, Moving English Forward, has got a lot of things absolutely right. Now, I know a lot of people would think that they were the cause of the problems in the first place, but whatever the case, some of their observations are very acute. What they've noticed is that at Key Stage 3 in particular, students find it very hard to talk about what it is that is the whole curriculum. They've lost sight of the whole curriculum. Many students feel that they're over-assessed, that the curriculum has become perhaps too fragmented, and certainly many Ofsted inspectors have noticed that lessons are heavily dominated by teacher talk, with students having a very, very limited time to carry out some quite complex task, which is then very heavily peer and self-assessed in the plenary. And I think there is a real problem here, that somehow things have become overcrowded in many ways. And we are trying now to support teachers in drawing back. And we are increasingly thinking about how we can just support teachers in teaching, in planning, but in allowing students to learn and guiding them in their learning rather than just sort of lecturing them and sort of forcing them through very small steps. So, yes, one area in particular that Ofsted have criticised is that the students get to the point where they have like 7 minutes, it turns out in practice, to do some very large piece of writing, and then they're stopped 10 minutes before the end of the lesson, and then there's some very elaborate peer assessment exercise. Well, we do recognise that we do want our lessons to be structured. The lessons which we put into the lesson plans for teachers, the teacher book, they are structured, but they come with a lot of guidance and advice so that teachers can adapt those. And of course they're Word files, so teachers can actually take those and adapt them as they like. In fact, we would rather they adapt them than simply take them off the peg. However, they do work in their own terms, and they make sense so that you can actually take them off the peg and run them. But whatever the case, we do try not to so overcrowd them but actually the danger is that students are simply sitting back in their chair and kind of taking it all, but they've got nothing really at the end. So we're trying to encourage teachers to use, we're trying to make it possible for teachers to use our lesson plans intelligently, in a professional way, to support them and to support them in using their professional skills rather than actually replacing those professional skills. So I think you'll find that this is going to really be very supportive of the new way in which Key Stage 3 is going, with this emphasis on skills development, creativity, and with a greater emphasis upon progress and helping students to make sense of their own progress. The latest suite of materials we're working on is around the theme of crime and detection. Well, I'm very excited about this because we've been putting it together with a team of writers, not with single writers, and we've been working on it collegiately, and that's been quite exciting. But the original text selection for crime and detection, you kind of might expect a sort of whodunit type anthology for the student book, and that was kind of the starting point. But we broadened out from there, and actually the crime and detection deals with that theme, that traditional theme of crime and detection, but actually it pushes the boundaries quite a lot. You will find Sherlock Holmes in there. You'll find Philip Marlowe, the detective, in there. You'll find a lot of texts which you might not have expected to find, and you'll find that the texts allow you to explore the whole notion of crime. Now, it's not a sociological unit; it's an English unit, but to support enriched discussion, we have got texts in there which allow you to think about, what is crime, how is crime presented, what is a detective, what do we mean by detection. So you will find Sherlock Holmes in there, but you'll also find, for example, an original non-fiction text on the tragedy at Bow Powell 30 years ago, in which thousands of people were killed when a poison gas cloud enveloped the city of Bow Powell in India. And it allows you to explore that issue of what is a crime, who is responsible for big crimes. The book even stretches to encompassing sections from Maurice Gleitzman's wonderful novel, Once, which is the funniest novel ever written about the Holocaust, and that takes some doing. So you can see that the notion of crime is expanded far and wide. The notion of what detection is and finding out and being found out. We allow the texts to help teachers to explore those issues in ways which will interest students, I think, and because they're so broad-ranging, a great many students of great many abilities will be able to engage with them very, very productively.